Hello, we're again with Simona. This is part two of her story that she was already uh, sharing and conveying to us. This is part two of her story. We were left off on how you were in detention center, as you called it. So I'll let you get into that and explain more about it. But before we do that, again, I want to express a little bit of warning to the audience. Your story is intense. It has things that are could be triggering, say about mental illnesses or detention centers, abuse and kidnapping and things like that. So I just want to again warn the audience that some of your story could be, you know, adult stuff. Just it could be intense. And again, I would remind everybody, why does Simona look like this? So again, she is dressed up in a Venetian costume from the Carnival of Venice. Hence the background and the chair and everything is very much in a traditional Venetian style. And going back to the 14th, 15th century, people would dress up mainly with a mask. The costume that came later, but the mask really is what has been the way of participating among classes that conventionally you wouldn't get to participate, or do things in public that the next day you wouldn't have to pay the consequences. So anonymity to have freedom. And in this particular case, her anonymity is giving her freedom to speak and give her story. And through that story, again, I tell us, what is it that you want to convey more than anything? What is about your story that you want to share, that you want to convey more than anything? What is it, your motive, I guess?
So I'd say a couple different things. One, I am about 1 year and 2 months sober from cannabis.
Awesome.
I used to be in the cannabis industry, and I had a lot of education about it, and I was a part of a community, and people would say, it's a plant, it's medicinal, it's healthy, if it comes from a plant, you're fine, it's healthy for you. No one ever killed somebody on weed, no one ever did anything bad on weed. But they're also not talking about when you get up in the morning, you smoke weed. You take a break, you smoke weed. You eat food, you smoke more weed. You go to bed, you smoke weed. It's constant. People oftentimes, whether they want to admit it or not, smoke weed because they are coping through life. They have things that they're dealing with. They want to escape reality. They want to numb the pain. They want to find a way to cope through daily living. Sure, you get a nice little buzz or a nice little high off of it, but you can't ignore the price that comes along with that. And it seems very cliche to say that cannabis, is a gateway drug, but for some it is. It leaves you vulnerable. It can, you smoke so much you don't realize that you're not on the same level as everyone else. You don't realize that you are more goofy or more silly or more horny or more, dumbed down or more numb. You don't realize that you are not how other people are that aren't on cannabis. And for the most part, I did just smoke weed, on a rare occasion, say for my birthday. I had a friend that gave me some MDMA, party drug. Okay, so I used to grow mushrooms. Those are, you could say, light drugs. I never did meth, I never did heroin, all those taboo ones. But I really do want to stress that, cannabis is a drug. In this world that we're living in currently, cannabis has so many additives, so many, pesticides. You can't verify where it's, you want to pause it? Turn the music off? Okay. You can't always verify where it's coming from. And it sounds a little cliche, you know, you see these billboards on the freeways, not your grandma's weed. It's not your grandma's weed, and I think that's what they're trying to say. It's not something that, you know, you weren't smoking a doobie in the 60s and it was just the plant. It's not just the plant anymore. You know, you also see these billboards that say, like, oh, teenagers are, what, like 17% more likely to have a psychotic disorder. These are real things that nobody's talking about, but a lot of people, especially in the industry, have these stories now that are coming out. Some people are smoking weed and they're coughing up blood, or they're getting intestinal problems. It's actually causing a lot of health problems for people. It's also not good for your lungs. So yeah, if someone had terminal cancer, or someone was bedridden in severe pain and they're older and they're disabled, smoke some weed. Yeah, in those conditions it kind of makes sense. But, you know, day-to-day living, it's not something that is sustainable, really. And then you can get into the withdrawals of weed, which, my God, makes you feel like you could die. It truly does. There's a dependency that you have to feeling elevated. And when you find out that you're not elevated every day anymore, and you have to go through life trying to understand what life is like, not high, it's a lot.
So you wanna educate people on how weed is not what it might have been decades ago,
right?
And express how intense it really is, right? But what does that have to do with your story? Like, how does?
Well, so it, you know, at least for me, you know, I was told by a psychiatrist, you know, I couldn't figure out why I was anxious, why I was depressed, why I had all of these issues. And it was a lot of different factors that were involved. You know, one was cannabis, and so I know not to consume that anymore. But me personally, having really any kind of substance in my body, for me, can trigger other things, like episodes. And although I was smoking for a decade non-stop, I didn't have a lot of problems, and I was surrounded by people that did it. But, you know, I was alone. I was alone when I was smoking that day, and it caused me to, oh, it's just some neighbors outside, not a big deal. They seem like chill dudes. They're smoking a cigarette, you know, no problem, no harm in going up to them. And that got me into a lot of trouble because, you know, really, what's the difference between that and getting drunk and then going out in the streets, and then you're like, oh, what's the big deal? They're just random strangers. So, you know, it's to each their own, but, you know, it was a problem for me, and because it led to this domino effect, this snowball effect, you know, enough pretty awful things happened that convinced me that it was not worth it to keep pursuing.
So in the first episode that we did last time, when you were mentioning the story that you were drugged, sounds like what happened is your activity with specific substances led you to approach or be approached by some of these guys, so these characters that had other things that really were much more debilitating and left you, as you say, you were drugged.
And again, this is weed we're talking about. I wasn't smoking meth. I wasn't on heroin. But if weed could put you in that type of situation, it really just goes to show the type of weed that's out there. And I really do want to stress, modern day weed is a drug. You should not think that it's not. It is a full-blown drug, and it is harmful to a lot of people.
Okay. All right. Now, well, having said that, I think now that our audience is a little bit caught up, with the intent of your story and sort of how it started. Let's now kind of catch up with what we left on the last episode. And again, if you give just a quick synopsis of what happened, and where you were drugged, right, and then you ended up in a penthouse, and then what just quickly what happened?
I was sexually assaulted by two men. And then I was still drugged and then coming off of drugs, and I was able to escape. And that's when I went down to the parking structure of the building. I called for help. A cop saw me. I asked them to take me home, and she instead took me to a detainment center. And the other piece of information that I wanted to throw out there was, it's very easy, especially these days, to fall in the cracks of the system. And it's so important, sober or not sober, to have a good support system. Friends and family that you trust. If you are going to partake in any sort of substance, it's good to do it with your loved ones around you, or have them know what you're doing. I was talking to a sex trafficking defense attorney the other day, and she had me speak with an advocate about other victims of trafficking, and we discussed that a lot of victims do not go to law enforcement for help because oftentimes law enforcement is involved. And it is of my personal belief that you need to write a police report to say what you need to say on paper to legally put somebody into a detainment center against their will. How do you do that? She tried to kill herself, she wanted to harm herself, she wanted to harm other people, blah, blah, blah. So I have a nice, beautiful police report saying a lot of BS that unfortunately was not true. I have a police report that says that I wanted to kill myself and I tried to jump off the parking structure ledge. No, I was calling for help trying to escape the person that had just assaulted me. And unfortunately, there's a lot of health insurance scams out there and a lot of deals that go on with law enforcement. And it's of my personal belief that she's able to get a check in her pocket for sending me somewhere. And that's kind of what irks me about going to this place. So when I went to the detention center, no paperwork, no therapist, no psychiatrist, nobody interviewing you. They just dump you in a spot. They say, this is your room. These are your bunkmates. And I had two roommates that, one, she was completely out of her mind. I don't know what had happened to her, but she was not right in the head. And the other bunkmate she was homeless. Had very intense schizophrenia. And I had to stay awake all night because she would stand over my bed and try to get me to remove my clothes to show her my body parts. And it was very uncomfortable because I had a week where I didn't feel like I could shut my eyes because the people in my room were not right. And there is kind of like a stereotype when you go to a detainment center. Oh, it's just people that are mentally ill or homeless. Yeah, some of them do go there for 3 square meals a day. But you also get victims in there. You get immigrants in there. You get people that have been harmed that get put in there. I wasn't allowed any phone calls. And all I really wanted to do while being stuck there is share my story. And I was like, hey, where are the pamphlets? Where are the resources? Who can I talk to about what happened? Is there anyone that I could talk to share my story? Maybe get some legal help. Maybe get some therapy. None of that was a thing. I would have to give up some of my food to try to have somebody call on my behalf out to family. And it wasn't until the very last day where I had my grandma's number and I was able to call her, and somebody in my family was able to know where I was. What bothered me the most was I was in a hospital, detainment center for a week. Who was watching my cat? I don't like to think about that. My cat probably didn't have food and water for a week. And he was completely isolated in here. And that part really sucks. I don't want to think about that. So after the week was over, I was able to get released. And it was a really weird situation because everybody in the hospital knew I wasn't trying to harm myself. I wasn't trying to hurt somebody else. If anything, I was considered like the popular kid because I was the sane one with a bunch of drugged up people around me. They actually force you to take medication. They don't know your medical history. They don't do an examination on you. But you have to stand in a line 3 times a day and consume whatever pills they give you, whatever they want you to take. And you have to hold it, you have to take it, you have to show them your tongue, and you just have to take it. So that's not fun, being involuntarily drugged as well. And you don't get to know what they're putting in your body, and if you don't want it in your body, too bad. So that's why I called it a detainment center, because no, it wasn't jail. I wasn't in a jail cell, but we did have these robes that we had to wear. And, you just walk through the halls, you see exit signs, but you can't leave. And that's not a good feeling, especially when you are coming off of GHP and PCP, and I'm looking around me and I'm just like, what is this place? Very poorly mismanaged, not very well taken care of. It's not a comfortable place to be at all. So, like I said, nobody actually thought I was a threat. So, it was a very weird situation, and I don't think this guy should have done this at all. Thankfully, he was a nice guy, but there was a worker that was patrolled the area at night. He took a liking to me, and he said, "You don't have to take an Uber ride home. I personally will drive you to your house." And I was like, that seems inappropriate, but okay, sure. So this worker at the hospital takes me home, and unfortunately for me, and fortunately, it was my birthday, the day that I was released. All I wanted for my birthday was to get out of there. And I guess the staff surprised me, and they made me like a little cupcake and brought me some snacks. And because I had everything stolen from me, I couldn't get access into my unit. So he actually was able to call AAA and open up my door for me. And then, he let me inside, and thank God he didn't take advantage of me. But the slightly humorous part of the story is he was kind of like a bigger guy, and he kind of looked like this guy. I think it was from the movie Sandlot, but you could picture like the kid from Sandlot, the chubby guy that sees the lifeguard. And I'm not joking you, he did this. He gets in his car and he goes, and it was so cute. But he said, happy birthday, and he gave me the little cupcake. And the part that was a little sad was, I was a little triggered by that cupcake, because when you live where I live, you don't eat things from people because they're laced. So when I looked at it, I kind of screamed, and I threw it in the trash, because I was like, what if it was tampered with?
Right.
Because it's a real thing that happens.
Yeah, that's how you end up in the first place.
So I didn't eat it, but it was, a nice gesture. And I got in my house, and tried to get back to normal, but you know, the thing was, still wasn't normal. It's like I might have been off of the drugs that I was drugged with, but I was still having an episode. And an entire week in a mental facility, no one treated that. No one knew how to deal with that. So, and I was out of my mind, so how was I going to take care of myself? So yes, I was safe, and yes, I had my cat, but I was still out of my mind. And I come back to a place that was ransacked, destroyed. Still didn't have a phone. Still couldn't contact someone. What was I going to do? Go to a neighbor? Hi, can I use your phone? No. So it was a couple days later, and I was trying to kind of recoup. I was getting my senses back, and I think at this point I can honestly say I was 80%, 90% back to my normal self. But now I was dealing with trauma. I was dealing with, oh my gosh, all of this stuff had recently happened to me. Now I'm alone. I'm in a dangerous area. The guys that laced that cigarette, they're still my neighbors. These people still live around me. I'm not safe here. So a couple weeks prior, you know, I was friendly with some of the neighborhood bloke, but they were like homeless. So, you know, they were harmless, but they were also like my age. They were just like kids that chose to smoke meth and, you know, didn't get along with their family. And so they kind of jumped around from house to house. But some of them were cool. And so I had told one of them, like, hey, like, I just need somebody to, like, stay here on the floor so I feel like I have some sort of safety, that someone else is here so that I'm not alone. Because he was homeless, you know, he was like, yeah, sure, I'll stay here. Thankfully, he never took advantage of me, but the point of the story was, so he had been gone for a few hours, and it was just me in the house. And I see some people, again, different people, but in the same house of where I was drugged. And I see a guy that I recognize who, like, I was friendly with, because, you know, they're not all bad. And so he happened to be standing next to this guy. I thought they knew each other. Apparently, they did not. So when the guy who was standing next to him said, hey, can I borrow your charger? Like, I need to plug in my phone. In my head, I was thinking, well, if I give him my portable charger to charge his phone, he's going to steal the charger. I don't want him to steal my charger. I barely have anything left in my apartment. So my head, still kind of frantic and not all there and not really doing the right thing, said, you know what? My friend's right there. Everything's fine. Like, why don't you come in, put your phone in, and charge your phone inside of my outlet? Mm-hmm. I'm not saying it was rational thinking, but I was, you know, just trying to be nice. And I was really, what I was doing was keep your friends close and your enemies closer kind of situation. I was like, I'm in a vulnerable spot and I need, you know, to make good with the neighborhood so that I can kind of keep myself safe. That was like some sort of weird logic that I had, where I thought if I kind of got on their level and I was like the cool one that gave them water bottles or gave them food sometimes, maybe they'll be nice to me, maybe they won't hurt me. That was kind of my thought. So this part gets real weird real quick. I charge his phone into my outlet, and then I send him towards the door so that he would leave. And he goes out of the hallway, immediately turns around. I don't even know where it came from, but he essentially went like this. and he pulled, I'm not making this shit up, pulled out an AK-47. And he said, get inside your house. And then he locked the doors, and now it's me, this random dude, with an AK-47. And I'm thinking, how the fuck did you get an AK-47? That's a big freaking gun. He shuts all the blinds, he turns out all the lights, and at this point, I'm essentially at gunpoint. He's holding me hostage. And then he said, where are your valuables? And I was like, dude, I was just robbed. What do you mean valuables? He's like, well, you gotta find anything you can and put it in the center of the room. And so he starts pointing down at the floor, and he's like, get everything together. He said, we're gonna wait for someone to show up. I was like, okay, this isn't good. Turns out this guy was just released from prison 2 days prior. And he had, I guess, some sort of slip that you're given, that you give to like your parole officer, and you have to put like a mailing address of somewhere where you're going to be, where they can send mail to you and know where you're going to be so they can keep track of you. He didn't have a viable place to put down, so he's put the gun to my head, and he said, put your address down, put your signature down, put your information down, because this is, I guess, going to make him look good for parole. So I put everything in the center of the room that was valuable, and he's like small talking. By the way, this guy is like on meth. Like, he is loaded, like total drug addict. This guy is like off his rocker. And there's like a knock at the door, and he opens up the door, and this woman comes in. She told me later if I had ever said what her name was out loud or told anyone the identity of who she was, she would come back and she would blow my brains out. So this girl was essentially, she was like the ringleader, the boss lady, the one who was actually in charge. He was more just kind of like her puppet. She didn't have an AK-47, but she did have a shotgun. And it's so hard to say what went down there because I kind of describe it like a circus. It was pure chaos for the next 12 hours. So she's upset because she comes in and she's talking to the guy. She said, why did you bring a cop in here? And he looked at me and he's like, are you a cop? And I was like, of course I'm not a fucking cop. And she's like, I don't believe you, you're a cop. I was like, how am I a cop? And she put a gun to my head. She's like, tell me the truth. And I'm freaking out because I'm like, I'm not a cop. How do I convince this woman that I'm not a cop? And my eyes are getting super dilated. And they thought I was on drugs. I wasn't on drugs. I was so terrified and mortified, thinking that gun's going to go off at any second. My life is going to end. And I had such sheer terror that my eyes were super dilated. Another knock on the door. And it was the homeless guy that was staying with me. She drags him in, shuts the door. And he's like, whoa, what did I step into? And he's thinking this is some sort of like fetish party going on. And he's like, what did I step into? And I was like, dearie, this is not good here. We got ourselves into a situation here. So he is a witness of, what was going down. And he tried to calmly explain to them, like, look, she's not a cop and you don't have to worry about that. And then at this point, because they kind of like ransacked my house a little bit, the guy lost the paper. So this paper was in the midst of all of this chaos all over the house, and they chose not to leave until we found that paper. So they put the gun to my head, they threw me on the floor, and they said, find the paper, find the paper. And again, it felt like a circus, and I kind of was talking back to him. I said, like, you fucking dumbass are the one that lost the paper. Like, how am I supposed to find your paper? You're the one that lost it. I don't care. Find it. Worst part was I wasn't giving him what he wanted. So he took the gun and he shoved it into my cat. And he hurt my cat. And I started bawling my eyes out. Because I was like, you just hurt my cat. Like, you hurt an animal. This is not okay. So I'm screaming all over the floor trying to find this paper. Another knock on the door comes in. It was a neighborhood meth addict girl that was looking for the guy that was staying with me. She gets dragged into the picture, except for she is on their level. Ooh, guns! Let me play with the guns! And so it's like the three of them are just like bantering. They're smoking meth in front of me. They're lighting up cigarettes. They're putting the cigarettes out on my furniture, on my kitchen, or on my bathroom sink. Now I have a stain on my bathroom sink that's actually from them, like, marking their territory. And then I just remember, I have this weird memory of the girl saying, like, oh, it's okay. Like, I'm going to come back and I'm going to replace all this. Like, don't worry, we have a lot of money. Obviously, that never happened. But she, sorry, you distracted me. You're going to have to edit this. To wrap up, their plan was to rob so many houses, essentially, and it's weird. They were bragging. They were saying, oh, we've got $10 million and bags full of guns. Now we just need a car and we're going to flee to Mexico and, like, start over. And I was, like, kind of like their guinea pig. So after these two neighbors that get dragged into my house and these two guys, I finally found the guy's stupid fucking paperwork. And I said, take your fucking paper, get out of here. But it was about 12 hours that they were here, and it bled into the middle of the night, and they didn't leave until probably like 5, 6 in the morning. But all the windows were shut, the doors were shut, cigarette smoke everywhere. I mean, this place was like a casino in here. It was just awful. So yeah, I mean, flash forward, a year and a half later, a friend took me to a shooting range, and he tried to show me how to shoot guns, and I couldn't do it because I didn't realize that I was so kind of mortified of guns. And this guy that was trying to train me said he could tell that I experienced some sort of trauma because every bullet that went off, I was triggered. I'd always wanted to shoot guns before and thought I would be cool like James Bond, but it's not like that in reality when you've come face to face to guns. So in conclusion, this whole snowball effect led me from being drugged, robbed, raped, trafficked, held hostage, and it concluded with my family finally getting a hold of me saying, don't you ever let anyone in your house again. And it wasn't until all the drugs left my body, me kind of being in a quiet space with no one around, to kind of eventually, very slowly, come back to my senses. And all of this happened in a matter of 3 or 4 weeks. And it took about 6 months, really, for me to recover after that before I could find another job and be out in civilization again. But it took some time.
We're going to talk about that. But I'm sorry, again, we're basically reached the limit of our segment. But it's very intense stuff, and, rightfully so. It takes you, there's a lot to share. So, I can appreciate that you had so many things to tell the audience about your experience. Once again, you're giving yourself your identity here to protect your identity. And what is your name again? Simona. Just for the audience who just came at the last minute, Simona is been sharing her experiences about how bad things can get from just recreational drugs. So for that is, have our order to the first episode and the ones that we just finished here. But there's a lot still that what happens, how you recover from everything you said, and I think we still need to give you a chance to say that, because there's people who haven't had your experience the way you say it, but have had another type of episodes from consequences from drugs. And you've been sober for how long again?
A year and 2 months.
Year and 2 months. I think there's a lot to gain from sharing what it took to get there. So we're gonna give you one more chance to keep telling your story, as long as it takes. But again, Simona, thank you for being here on our Masquerade Confessions once again, and we'll probably have to do another episode so you can give us the recovery part. So once again, thank you for sharing your time, and we'll see you in the next one.